Hello everyone, this is going to be a slightly different video. I'm going to go through the settings that I use for the Logitech G29 on F1 2015. The first thing I want to get out of the way is these are my settings that I use, that I've been fiddling with for the past sort of 24 hours just to get the game working how I want it. Obviously it's going to be a bit different depending on how you like racing games to feel. I like them a bit more arcadey than sim, so that's why I've got the settings the way they are. Why am I making this video? Well, because the videos that I found weren't really very good. They were sort of fiddling with settings and doing things that I didn't necessarily agree on. They weren't really explaining things very well, so I figured I'd make a video that anybody who finds it can sort of sort it out for themselves. Use this as sort of like a base, basically, as a guide to start them off in the right direction to make things a little bit easier. So the first thing you want to do is open your gaming software and click on the wheel, and then F1 2015 should have its own profile. I have F1 2015 set up for F1 2016 as well. Automatically F1 2015 will have, if you go to steering wheel and then click on the little thing, access properties, set it to 360 degrees. But I've set it to 270 because it feels a little bit better for me. I don't have to twist as much. I'm not going into full lock all the way around. It's more sort of, what would it be, 7 o'clock to 5 o'clock, something along those lines. Sensitivity, that's usually way up here. You want that way down. Some people say 10%. I've got it at 15. That feels fine for me. And you want the enable centering spring in force feedback games to be disabled. These are the recommended. It's kind of the recommended settings from Codemasters themselves. Click on OK and that'll save it, and then you can just click out of that and it'll hide it in the background. You want to do that before you start the game, otherwise it can get a bit funky. One post I found on racedepartment.com, I'll put the link in the description. It's really good. It basically explains the in-game settings, and I'm going to be using this as a basis for what they mean. So let's go back into the game. The menu for F1 2015 is awful, so we'll try and go through it. The first thing you'll see is session options and settings. They're different. Session options is basically what the game looks like and how it runs. So my driving view, I use TV pod. Now a lot of people will I use the center TV pod just so I can see more track. I think as I get used to the game, I'll want to use the cockpit view. And then if you go to cockpit view, you can... So confusing. Right, it's not in any of these settings. Exactly. Yeah, it's dumb. Anyway, we'll get back to that in a minute. On-screen display, obviously all the different stuff. If you want things like the assists, gearbox suggested gear, then you need to be not in cockpit view for it to show up, which is nice and confusing. I use a custom for the assists, so I have brake and assist off completely because I like the G29 feel, the way it feels like a normal brake. Anti-lock brakes on, even though modern F1 cars don't have that anymore. Traction control I have on full, and then dynamic racing line on full just so I can get used to the tracks. I have gearbox as manual, so I use the paddles. You can't. I'm sure you could use the shifter if you wanted to, but there's no point really in an F1 game. So I use the paddles instead on the G29, and then pit assist is on at the moment. I'm going to slowly hit them down so they're all off eventually, but just trying to get used to the game with a custom arrangement in terms of the assists. Right, driving view, you can alter the driving view, but you can't do it in session options. You have to do it in settings. So you have to go to, there we go, so graphics options and then camera options, and this changes the field of view, so how much you see, how close or far away you are. Then you can make it go up or down in terms of offset, vertical and horizontal. So basically, are you tall, are you short? The angle in which you're looking up or down at, near clip plane, your guess is as good as mine. Mirror angle, so the mirrors, how much they're looking at, and then camera shake, you're wobbling all about. The defaults aren't very good. I don't like the camera shaking, and the field of view really needs to be whacked up just so you can see what's going on. It just doesn't feel quite right. That's why, we'll go to camera options again, go all the way back to the session options. I choose the TV pod center, so you're slightly above the action, I guess, where the actual helmet would sit. In terms of steering controls, you can go to settings and then customize controls. Again, this is all very awkward, not very intuitive. Force feedback, you want force feedback on. Feedback strength is how much power the force feedback motor is using when you're going around corners and stuff. I have that set to 100, but if you find it hard to turn in the corners and it's a bit too strong and your arms are starting to ache, then you can turn that down. Environmental feedback is how much it shakes and wobbles, and the G29 for some reason really goes for it when it's on the higher 100, so I've got that set to 40. And then wheel weight is basically just how heavy it is normally without the feedback strength kicking in. I've got that set to 90. You can fiddle with that a little bit, it doesn't really make much difference in terms of the actual feel. Advanced wheel settings is the really weird one. So steering dead zone is how much nothingness there is in between, so how much movement it takes before it kicks in. I have that set to 0. If you have all of these set to 0 in terms of steering, then it's 1-to-1 basically. Steering linearity and saturation, this is where I have to go back to this post because it's confusing, it really is. So basically having all sides set to 0 means you have a 1-to-1 control, which is fine, but obviously some people have different PC wheels. This is for the G29. I'd recommend having 0, it feels fine. So raising linearity in F1 2015 will make it turn slower near the centre. It could be helpful for wheels that have a very small amount of degrees of rotation. Steering saturation is basically the opposite. Setting it to 100% means it has more or less a 3-to-1, so you'd have to turn it even more. Kind of a bit not needed for the steering, but in terms of the throttle and brake, maybe it will. You can change the brake to the clutch. I know a lot of people like doing that because they don't like the way the brake feels on the G29 shifters, which G29 steering wheel set. So I have the throttle dead zone to 15 because I use the throttle. I'm way too heavy footed with the throttle, so there's a little bit of nothing before it kicks in. And linearity I've left to 0. Brake linearity I've put to 5 because then you have, when the brake's going down, there's sort of a little bit of give in terms of how heavy footed you are. So if you're really heavy footed and just slamming on the brakes, turning that up a little bit might ease that slightly. You can then go to advanced wheel settings, driving controls, and there should be a preset for Logitech G29, but what I do is I use a custom, which is X, which is square if you're using the G29, and I change, the only thing I change is DRS to the nice big button in the red circle on the G29, just to make it nice and obvious. I don't know what the original is for that. But all of those settings for the G29 are good and they work well. The main things you want to change are the G29 gaming software and Logitech, the axis of the steering wheel. Try 360 if that's feeling a bit too much. Try 270 and make sure the sensitivity is way down. That'll help a lot. And center spring. I've played the game with the center spring enforced and I've played it without, and I don't know, I don't think it makes that much of a difference. It feels different, but in terms of actually playing, it feels fine. And that's basically it. So remember the view changes you can make if you're doing cockpit mode to make it easier to see the track, and then basically just faff about with the assists, faff about with, trying one on, one off, a lap, and I go into driving time trial mode quite a lot, just to see how things work basically, and you can sort of faff about and hopefully you'll get it to feeling how you want it to feel. And I've got it to the point where I'm far more confident in how it feels when I'm playing it. Not necessarily making myself any better, but I'm not going off at every corner because I've understeered, and that's what was happening when I first started playing the game. So hopefully these settings and a little walkthrough of the Logitech gaming software and the in-game settings helped a little bit and made some sense. I don't know. I'm going to do videos like this for most of the games I'm playing with the Logitech G29. Obviously that folds over to the G290. No, 920. I can't remember. The Xbox version. It does work. The steering wheel is good, and maybe I'll do a review of it in the future as well. Hope that helps a little bit. Who knows? Thanks for watching.